Let's talk with a former Miami Hurricane who is never afraid to speak his mind.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricane, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, your host, University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. Fall camp is back in full swing, but I know they don't practice these days the way that they used to practice back in the 80s, right? Where they didn't care about lightning. They didn't care about guys sweating their asses off. So here's a man who lived through that. One of my personal favorites. I've worked with this man in radio before, but long before he got into radio, he was a Miami Hurricanes defensive tackle and a great one in the NFL as well. Big Sills, Dan Sileo is with us. Dan, how are you, sir?
Hey, man, it is so great to see you and be part of this. I got a chuckle there because when we're at practice back in the day and Howard Schnellenberger set the record, and so Jimmy kind of carried it a little bit, and Kevin O'Neill kind of had to change it. We used to be way over at the other end of Greentree, and the defensive line would have to run all the way across to get the three waters. We'd run there. We'd get our waters. The whistle would blow. We're like, holy criminy, we didn't even get any water. We have to run all the way back. Getting water back in those days was considered soft.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's just a different mentality. I think it's better today because now there's more player care. But back in the day, man, you know, those old Alabama Bear Bryant stories, you know, I mean, it was really true. They beat the living hell out of you back in the day. So it would, hey, Greentree is legendary, and there's a lot of bodies under that place.
Yeah, I'm sure there are. Hey, at the top, I mentioned Dan Sileo is someone who is not afraid to speak his mind, right? And sometimes people don't always like what he has to say. And a great example of that is I was working with you local radio at WQAM about 10 years ago. This was while Al Golden was the coach. And Al Golden was scared to death of you and what you were going to say day to day on the flagship station. Like, he was scared to death of Big Sills.
Absolutely. Well, because, you know, I've learned one thing in broadcasting. Most people in life don't want to be told the truth.
Right.
And they'd rather be lied to. So when you tell me you give up 93 points in 2 weeks and you give up 1,100 yards in total offense and you try to convince Canes fans that you're good, that's a problem for me. Yeah, and when you're not recruiting the South Florida schools like Woodrow Wilson or Palmetto or Southridge, and you're not doing any of those places that, you know, Don Soliger used to set up all of our pipelines. And then when that crumb of a coach, Larry Coker, destroys all of those connections by firing that entire coaching staff and thinking he knew Canes culture, he was the only guy, Dono, that didn't just carry on the tradition of the other three coaches. Howard, Jimmy, and Dennis all kept those pipelines going. That's why we were able to survive the winning, but with different faces. Al changes that. It was the coaching staff that completely changed the culture from that loss in that Fiesta Bowl to Ohio State. That's what's been different.
Yeah, no. And now with Cristobal, like I get the sense, and part of it, Mario, personality-wise, he's always an alpha. He is an alum, and we've had coaches who are alums before, and they didn't always do it this way. But Mario's not afraid of what people like you have to say, Dan. So what are the alumni relations like? Is Cristobal kind of open? I mean, you talk about pipelines with local high schools. Is Mario reopening the pipeline with alumni like yourself?
Anytime I text him, he texts me back. I mean, our communication is absolutely awesome. He tells me what's going on in recruiting. He tells me about landing big guys. I do all of this, and it's really great. And I know it's not just me. It's everyone, because he knows he needs the entire community for him to be able to, you know, reconnect, get everything going, and get the community reconnected again. I'll tell you one thing that I miss a lot about the University of Miami that, to me, I don't see it today. You know, it's almost like a professional football team in the fact that players come in from other places around the country, they play and they leave. Well, when we played at the University of Miami, I felt like I was part of Coconut Grove. I felt like I was part of Overtown or Liberty City or Belle Glades and them places. You felt being part of those communities, and that has been lost for some reason. Maybe, again, I sound like old man get off my lawn sometimes, and maybe it's the Hard Rock and we don't have the OB, the old lady like we used to. And I think a lot of the tradition was taken out of that place. You know, I don't think there's any coincidence, Donald, that both the Miami Hurricanes and the Miami Dolphins, since they've been in Hard Rock, I mean, how many AFC championship games has the Dolphins been in since they've been in that building too?
Maybe.
I mean,
and they were way back in the day. Nothing recently.
Nothing recently, right? Only with Marino early because they were coming over from the OB. But the Dolphins and the Hurricanes have had limited success in that building. And again, you know, what does a building have to do? It's because you're closer to downtown. You know, we used to get off the buses at the Orange Bowl, and people would have brown paper bags. You never knew what they were. I don't even know if you could do stuff like that today. But there'd be Cuban sandwiches and food and Cokes, and I got my post-game meal from people in the line when we were walking out of the place because they were so thrilled just to see us and be part of that whole thing growing up. And I tell you, man, we have to get back to that, and that's kind of some of the stuff that I think Mario's doing. Now, you know, the reason Randy failed, because he had a person in Donna Shalala and Barry Alvarez, who they believed that they knew what was in the best interest of Canes football. What in the world would Barry Alvarez and Donna Shalala know about Canes football? What would they possibly know? They built Wisconsin. So back in our day, that was roadkill, Wisconsin. Okay? I mean, so the things, they got in Randy's way. I mean, when you don't recruit a guy like Lamar Jackson and you can't keep a guy like that, or even the kid Snoop, who's the backup quarterback in Baltimore, who had to go to Utah because we weren't recruiting the right guys. I don't know, dude. I mean, our recruiting process is getting back in track, I believe. But the guys that we're recruiting, I keep hearing 5 stars. I keep hearing 5 stars. Mario tells me, you know, hey, we're supposed to have 4 5-star guys with the program that he took over. Funny, I see 5 stars in Georgia. I see 5 stars with us, and I see 5 wins.
1 win for each star. You know, something I wanted to get your take on, like, is you played under Jimmy, okay? I know, obviously, Jimmy, tremendous coach, and I take nothing away from Jimmy, but wasn't there a lot of self-policing by the players and player coaching? Because, you know, I got to tell you, Sills, one thing that really impressed me, I was at Canes Media Day yesterday, and I'm talking to one of the defensive tackles, Ahmad Moten, who's a younger guy. Hopefully he becomes a name to remember. And he said something to me. I didn't like bait him or kind of lead him into saying this or anything like that. Just it kind of came out of the blue when we're talking about the differences between last year and hopefully how things turn around this year. And he mentioned something that last year the players were trying to do everything for the coaches. And this year so far, he feels like they're trying to do it for themselves and for each other. And I like that answer. Like I didn't lead him into that, but because that's the kind of attitude you need, right? Because, like, you know, Michael Irvin wasn't doing things for his coaches. He was doing things for Miami and for himself. There's got to be some self-policing and self-coaching as well.
Here's a great story about Jerome Brown. So, you know, Jimmy would give us his play like Hurricanes, do this and that and all that. And again, he was never really a great halftime or pep talk guy. Jimmy motivated us Monday through Friday in practice and got us ready to go with hard work. All that stuff, you know, is for the TV cameras, but he was a motivator during the week. And what would happen is Jimmy would come in and say something, hey, let's play smart, let's do this. And as soon as that coach would leave, Jerome Brown would go, F that. This is about us.
Yeah.
This is about us. No one believes we can do this. Everyone in this room knows we can. Okay, the difference between them and us, we know we're going to. And so it was leadership amongst the players. And can you imagine with all the players that I played with, all the leadership for people like Winston Moss and Jerome Brown and Alonzo Highsmith and all those guys, even Melvin Bratton, all those kind of guys, to be able to be forceful and people buy into it. I mean, it was just the great – dude, outside of my family, that's the greatest moments in my life because I was so close to being around perfection each and every single day. We knew full well we could not get to being perfect all the time, but we all lived and learned to live with greatness. It was just being around that whole entire environment and the vibe in the locker room and the different personalities we had, different political views, different ways of living. Nothing was off the table. Everyone goofed on one another, but we were family, man. And when you have that kind of relationship, anytime someone says something in a locker room like that, Donno, it becomes constructive. Yeah. But if you got people that you don't buy into and you don't believe, it becomes destructive.
That's a great, and I think a lot of that was happening last year, and I hope it's gone. I hope that problem is gone.
Well, I see these sidelines, and I see this Van Dyke kid, who I'm a big fan of because he's a Connecticut kid. I see these guys taking selfies on the sidelines. I wanted to jump through my television set and beat the living piss out of these guys because celebrating, I'm so happy to turnover chain. Hey, I don't mind the turnover chain. Give it to someone in the locker room. Okay, after a win, you look stupid at 5-7 giving out a turnover chain. You look dumb. It's dumb. Okay, after the game you won, I'm all good with that, man. I mean, I want to have fun too, dude. I mean, look, I played on teams that were some of the funnest teams in the history of Miami football. But dude, be smart about it. Don't look stupid.
Well, and don't you think, and maybe you've talked with Mario about this, that's why he got rid of that turnover chain, right? Because because listen, it's great, viral videos and GIFs on Twitter and stuff, but you're right. When you're down 28-0 and someone grabs an interception, it's like,
right.
You're 5-7. It's not so good.
It's uncomfortable. I mean, you get a turnover and you're getting killed 28-3. I mean, really, you're going to do that now? I'd have been like, I tell you, Alonzo Highsmith goes, how do you think that thing would have went over? I said, someone got hung from it. I go, nobody in the world is going to be going for anything like that. So, again, I mean, I just say this about our fan base a little bit. Since 2018, Miami's 33-28. And in the ACC, they're 23-18. Don't talk to me about, recruiting going well or this and that. Go win some freaking ball games. Yeah. Okay? We're picked 4th. And hey, and I want it to be known. Do I think Mario's the guy? I do. Do I think Mario's turning the culture around? I do. Do I think he's turning recruiting around? You got to remember something, Donno, about recruiting. Can you imagine? I want to throw this out there to you about the 2001 team, how the recruiting was. That 2001 team, do you know that if you took every offensive touchdown away from that team, every offensive touchdown, they'd have still went 8-4.
I saw that.
Recently. I mean, they still would have went 8-4. That's got to be one of the craziest statistics of all time. And Sean Taylor was the backup to Ed Reed.
Yeah, and Ed Reed, for everyone, and obviously recruiting is not the same as it was 25 years ago, but Ed Reed, I think, would have been a 2 or a 3-star when he was recruited. So sometimes you just have to find the right guys. That stars are great, but you never know who's going to end up being a Hall of Famer.
To your point here, I mean, Miami and Jimmy and Butch and all them guys looked at profiles. Yeah. I mean, you could have a guy like Russell Maryland who was recruited by 2 schools, or you could have Cortez Kennedy who was recruited by everyone. They looked for a profile of a kid. They looked for a certain type of a guy and player and what was inside this guy. I'll tell you this, man. You don't think there's any coincidence that Dave Wanstead had Darrelle Revis at Pitt, Aaron Donald at Pitt, had Curtis Martin at Pitt. I mean, hey, look, Dave, maybe not the greatest head coach, okay? However, Dave, Butch, Jimmy, all phenomenal talent evaluators. All phenomenal talent evaluators. And I think in the NFL, what got in Dave's way is a lot of voices. You had too many voices in the room.
Right.
Jimmy Johnson was the voice in the room, and that's why he was always great. There's no coincidence. Jimmy built the Miami Hurricane, or he elevated the Miami Hurricane program. And then when he went to the Dallas Cowboys, he turned a 1-15 program around. The guy was the greatest talent evaluator I've ever seen, and our talent evaluating at Miami is off. Donno, that Rivals has been the biggest pollution in the history of Canes football. Everyone looks at that rivals and goes, oh, well, we're recruiting rivals.
That's right.
We didn't recruit off rivals.
No.
We didn't win recruiting wars. We won national championships.
Yeah. And I had a conversation a couple weeks ago with Alonzo Highsmith, and and not only did I talk about kind of what he looks for scouting from football terms, and one of the most important things is he doesn't offer players he doesn't see in person. Like, he's got to watch you in person. But Highsmith talks as much about the personality of the player than he does about the physical abilities. And the first thing he says, and I know some people might hear this and you think it sounds dumb or sounds cliche, but he says you've got to love football. That may seem like a dumb thing to say, but Sills, especially this day and age where a lot of players just love themselves, they love social media and stuff, he wants to find actual dogs out there. That's a big part of their recruiting criteria now since Zoe's been back.
I'll tell you this, man. I mean, the University of Miami is a lot like Southern Cal and a lot like the Cowboys, as I mentioned. At the end of the day, dude, I think a lot of players for the last 20 years, I think they were enamored with being Miami Hurricanes, but not going out and winning ball games. Instead of representing what you really are supposed to be representing, we're not just representing the U. We're representing wins and losses. The program, I mean, 3 years I'm there. We lost one regular season ball game. I mean, I look at it now, and like I said, I gave you that 33-28 since 2018. I mean, I would have killed myself if I lost 28 ball games. I mean, the mentality that we had after losses. I mean, I remember the losses more than I do anything else that I did that place. It's funny. I was on the team that started the win streak, and we were the team in '85 that started. We got beat by Florida in the opener. And I'll never forget everyone in the locker room coming back. I go like this: we're not losing another ball game as long as we're all here. And we never did. And so, I mean, but generations of Canes classes went through that where they never lost at home.
Dude, I remember very similar to the story you just told. I remember after 2000 when, Miami lost the opener against Washington and they didn't lose a regular season game for like 3 years after that. I can remember after that 2000 season seeing an interview with Joaquin Gonzalez before 2001, and he like guaranteed we're going to go undefeated this year. Like, he guaranteed it, and they did it.
Let me ask you something. Since that Ohio State loss, what's happened to the program?
Well, I think a big thing, Sills, is they fell behind the times. Things that weren't that important in 2000, 2001, like facilities, money, resources, front office, I guess is not the right term. Administration actually, caring and wanting to invest in football. They fell behind. I think they're catching up with that stuff now, but they fell behind in that stuff for like 20 years. And then a lot of it, I don't have to rehash because you said a lot of it. Yeah, but a lot of it's the other stuff you said when you talked about Larry Coker, losing some of those pipelines to South Florida high schools and the recruiting and the standards going down. I think it's really all of that stuff. It's like, because listen, they weren't doing it as effectively as they were prior to 2000. But when you keep operating your administration the same way and you've got the Bamas and the Ohio States passing you by, they went way too long, and it's taken a long time to catch up now.
I'll tell you this, Donno. When I first got down to Miami, it was a 400 square foot gym. We had one bench press, two squat racks, maybe three. The place was a dungeon. It was right outside where you walk out of the locker rooms, which were terrible. I mean, the locker rooms, toilets would overflow. I go like this. I go, this team won the national title 2 years ago. I was like, unbelievable. Then you're shocked when you go to the Orange Bowl and you're like, and I'm being recruited by LSU and all these places, and I'm walking into these unbelievable facilities, right? And I had transferred from my facilities at Maryland were 10 times. I'm going like this. Jesus criminy, man. This team won the national title. And then Alonzo told me something. He goes, we don't play for this. He goes, yeah, we don't play for this. We play in spite of this. Huh. And I was like, okay. He goes, and so every place we went, we had a chip on our shoulder. Florida have all these practice fields, beautiful manicured everything, and we'd go in there and beat the piss out of West Virginia, beat the piss out of Pittsburgh, all these great-looking facilities. And it was kind of it was kind of like, it was kind of fuel for the fire a little bit that we would go in there and you thought you can have all the sexiest things on the planet. We don't have anything except us. And what it did was it galvanized us a little bit. However, I get it today.
Yeah,
you can't get
different.
kids in the building when you got a locker room. And isn't that funny, Donno? I cared about winning ball games and scoreboard. Kids today care more about facilities and how your helmet looks, practice facilities and shit like that. To us, that never mattered, man. The only thing that really mattered, and what I love about my school now, I mean, again, there's a lot of great people. I like Dan, the new AD. I love him very much coming over from Clemson. I love the whole setup that they have. But, dude, you're selling to you off of what I did. Let these players today create their own identity, and let these players today create their own bricks to put into the mortar so that they can build a championship and continue to build this program and what it is. The Miami Hurricane football program and alumni are the greatest alumni, in my opinion, in the United States of America. Look at the Hall of Famers that go in every year.
Incredible. I
mean, so to me, we've fallen behind on that because of 33-28 in the last 5 years. We just got to get back. I mean, 110-win season in how many years? I mean, come on, man. That can't go on like this. And it Don, it makes me crazy when I don't. It does. It's the only thing outside of my daughter telling me off that drives me nuts is the fact that we can't win 10+ games.
I know. I've seen it. I've seen it in action. I'll never forget that rant you had on the radio after the Notre Dame loss. It was, it was after Kansas State. I think it was.
Kansas State. We go into Kansas State and they roll us, and I go like this, and people are talking to me, Luther Robinson, this and that, and I go like this. Who? And we were the flagship station, and I quit on the air my post game show. I mean, I just go like I did. I quit on the air.
I remember. That's right. You never did another post game.
I never. No, and get this, because and of course, the old general manager tried to make it sound like it wasn't true, because I just went like this. I got better things to do than cover this team, man. I'm going to wash my car on Sundays because watching the Hurricanes play. You've seen me do my last post-game show. I will never do another post-game show again. I have no interest in it. I quit right there on the air, and everyone walked in and went, "Hey, so you really?" I go, "Yeah, I'm not covering that team. Are you kidding me? That football team is not a good football team, and that coach sucks." And I even got cornered one day from Joe Rose. And I get this. I'm walking into my studio. Joe Rose, he confronts me. He goes, "Why don't you support your team?" And I looked at him and I go, "I am." And he goes like this. And Joe Rose goes, "Al Golden's doing a good job." I go, "You really think he's doing a good job?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Joe, he's not. He'll be fired in 2 years."
Wow.
He's not doing a good job. He recruits the wrong kids. He's not a South Florida guy. He goes, "You aren't either." I go, "I know. And I know what it takes because I saw it." And he thought I was being They barred me from campus. I couldn't go on campus. Now, my relationship with the university is spectacular. I talked to the president even. They asked me my advice now.
Wow.
And look, the reason Mario has more baguettes and more cannolis right now to be able to do what he wants, it's the money. It's the financial commitment, not only to him, but to the assistant coaches. And when you spend that kind of money, dude, they're going to give you every opportunity to succeed. And I'll say this to you. If Mario Cristobal cannot turn this around, I don't believe anybody can.
I agree. And that's a good place to end, and a good place for me to allow Dan Sileo to tell people where they can see him and hear him later today, because you do a show Monday through Friday, Big Sills. Where can people catch that?
Absolutely. Jacob Sports. You can go to our fabulous channel. It's on YouTube and Jacob Sports. From 3 to 6, we talk a lot of football. You know me. I sprinkle everyone in. Coach Johnson during the football season will be coming on every Wednesday.
Awesome.
He has for the last 2 years. He's been one of the coolest people to me since I left Miami. I'll tell you this too, Donno. What's really great about my coaching staff, Butch Davis, Dave Wonstadt, Campo, Tony Weiss, and Jimmy, they were the same dudes to me when I was 18 years old that they are to me when I'm 58 years old.
That's awesome.
I mean, they're the same people. They treat me with great respect. They love me today like they did back then. Nothing's changed. So the truth that they spoke to us back then, you know, Jimmy's not going to speak to a guy who's not going to be producing for him. However, if you produced for him, you'll be somebody that was part of the building blocks for his legendary career. So, I mean, we get him on and everything. So Mario comes on an awful lot too. He helps me out a lot. So it's really great and a lot of fun. We've been building it. We're up to about 1 million views now on all the platforms, as I told you earlier. So it's kicking ass.
Dude, that's awesome, man. Keep up the good work there. And I encourage everybody to follow Big Sills on Twitter at Dan Sileo Show. Dan, thank you so much, man. You're one of the great Italian Americans to ever put the U helmet on.
Donno, you're my boy, and you always will be. Between you and Joy and Dwork, believe it or not, I love the three of you guys very much.
People may not remember this, but we worked with Joy Taylor as well. She's Hollywood. She's a huge star now.
Came on like 2 weeks ago. And she goes, do you remember Al Golden coming over to like some sort of Buffalo Wild Wings? And he was so nervous coming over. And I go, was Donald with us then? She goes, I don't know if he was.
They had me and Dwork were stuck in studio when you
and Joy
went out to Buffalo Wild
Wings. That's
Wings.
right. Joy's out there. And she goes, do you remember how afraid he was sitting next to you? Like, I go, that's because funny you say that. And so Joy, she always opens up and she goes, and it's funny, after Joy left and went across the street, that's when Donald became the update guy too, because, hey, real quick, Donald. So Joy goes like this, Joy, I'm the first guy to put her on the air.
Yeah.
And so I go like this, tomorrow you're doing updates. I go, and by the way, don't talk so much. Just tell me what I need to know.
Right.
And she goes like this. I go, sometimes you say too much. I mean, just get to the point. That's why I use the word suck. And so she goes like this. She goes, okay, you can do this? I go, it's my show. Don't worry about it. So she started doing top and bottom. She started doing updates for me. And, yeah, I mean, we're really proud because there's people I hate that were my producers. There's people I love, and you're totally one of the guys I love.
Thank you so much, Dan. Everyone check him out, Big Sills, Jacob Media. And we'll talk to you guys again next time on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.